Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so I've been wanting to cover this for a couple days now. Sam Seder went on Abby Phillips' roundtable show that she hosts on CNN. There's actually two of these, I guess. There's one that she does at night, which Sam Seder has also been on, but this was the morning Saturday show. And they do not make this stuff easy to access. I was looking for this segment for quite a while, and that's aside from the fact that it's also kind of sequestered. You know, they'll give Sam slots on these news shows. It seems like they're testing it out a little bit because, you know, Sam has a pre-existing relationship with a lot of these networks. He's been on CNN before. He's been on MSNBC before. He's been on Fox before. So he's kind of known in the circuit, but this is a sort of new moment in his career where he has his own audience that's increasingly relevant, as well as like a couple viral moments in the recent past. So I think that's given him some more leverage that has made it so that he's showing up on these news shows more. Emma Vigeland as well. And, you know, I've spoken about how it can be kind of a double-edged sword because it's good to get your voice out to a lot of people. But as Sam has mentioned before, you know, a lot of times if you speak in a way that is honest, it can be kind of unwelcome in these environments, and that's the kind of thing that gets you not invited back. So Sam has kind of built his career on that principle of like, I'll go if they invite me, and I don't care if they don't invite me back. So maybe he's trying to play things a little bit differently here, because I think the main issue is just that it's more of an institution and they have certain connections and political interests as well as business interests. And so it just kind of caps what you can and can't say. And I think the difference between Sam Seder and some of the other commentators that they will have on these programs, the distinction between them is pretty clear here in this segment. So this is the first one where Sam is directly asked by Abby Phillips about what he thinks of Trump's threats against Democratic lawmakers, saying that they are seditious and should be put to death.
And when Democrats, liken his behavior to a fascist or a dictator, but calling for the execution of political opponents fits the definition. And it's certainly more extreme than calling someone a descriptor. I mean, do you think that, I hear this sort of like, don't fall for the okie doke, he's just trying to distract you thing from Democrats a lot. Do you think this falls into that category, or is it something else?
Well, I mean, I think, frankly, you've got two sides that are preparing for perhaps what's going to happen over the course of the next year. Donald Trump's approval ratings are dismal. The Republican Party is on their back heels. They got destroyed, wiped out in a way that I haven't seen in 20 years in those elections 2 weeks ago. And so I think there's genuine concern amongst a lot of people in the country that Donald Trump is going to send in troops. He's already got these 500-person rapid response forces that are beginning to train and are going to be able to be deployed by spring. I think there's a lot of people who are concerned about what's going to happen over the course of the next 12 months in the run-up to the midterm elections. And I think the Democrats were trying to get out in front of that, and I think Donald Trump is trying to prevent them from getting out in front of it. And, you know, his rhetoric is, of course,
terrifying. His rhetoric is terrifying.
It's terrifying, but I think it's also indicative of what he's willing to do over the course of the next 12 months to make sure that Republicans retain the House.
No, I mean, but what do you mean? Do you mean in terms of actually following through on the threats, or what?
Well, I think there is a concern that Donald Trump is going to try and prevent the midterm elections from happening.
Okay, you're talking about these are the illegal orders.
Oh, okay, that he's trying to. Oh, okay.
Exactly.
But let's just talk about just what's happening right now and how we just think that he's planning ahead. What world do we live in when a president gives an idea that, yes, I think execution is okay for my political opponents? What world do we live in when we just ignore that and we don't talk about what that actually means? Because we're used to what he's done. He's numbed us. We're normalizing his behavior. I think that's really dangerous. And I think all of it, yes, it is a distraction. Yes, it is something for us to pay attention to. But how dangerous is it as we come off of a assassination of Charlie Kirk? How dangerous is it to hear him say this?
Brought that up.
As if someone
the
is...
violence in this country is one-sided, and everyone knows it, right? What Trump is
Tell me
talking about
more.
is sedition,
Tell
which
me
is a
more.
law and order process. It goes, by the way, George Washington had generals who did insurrections put
Yeah,
to
so
death
this
as
is kind of
well.
a weird moment where Sam's making a good point here, pretty straightforward, I thought, and yet for some reason this other person on the panel is kind of trying to challenge him on it, or like almost tries to argue with him, even though they're not really on opposite sides of the issue. It was kind of strange. This woman's name is Kari Champion, and she's more of a sports commentator. She more so comes from that world, so I thought that showed a little bit in her commentary, but essentially what she's reacting to here is that Sam doesn't quite answer the framing of the question. It's being framed a certain way by Abby Phillips. She says, do you think this is a distraction, or do you think it's, something very serious? And Sam just kind of lays out a realistic view of what it means in terms of what Trump is going to do and what the next year is going to look like. As well as what it says about sort of the strategy on the other side. And that kind of just opens the door to a more interesting conversation than usually happens on this show. And you can see that it kind of gets stopped by the fact that this Kari lady seems disturbed by the fact that he didn't just say, oh, it's a distraction, or oh no, it's very bad that he said this. And she gets stuck in this thing of like, we just need to sit for a second and just understand that this is not normal and this is not okay. And she kind of is like posturing like she's taking Sam to task by saying that or something. I don't think it's fully like that, but it was framed that way, probably just because that's how these shows go down. That's what they're supposed to do. But I think also that that's indicative of what these shows do, because I feel like the liberal side of the political equation has been kind of trapped in this world of like righteous indignance and beholding the gravity of the situation. Because when you say to yourself, well, hold on a second, we just need to think about the fact that this is something that's never happened before. This is unprecedented. We've never seen a president talk like this. We've never seen the norms in America broken down to this degree. And that's true. And it's true that it's worth taking seriously. But also I feel like we've been hearing that steadily this entire time, the entire time that Trump has been, even before he was president the first time. That's what we were hearing about him. We've never seen this level of political division, someone calling for their political opponents to be jailed. And the problem with that is that not only does it kind of keep people in this state of like paralysis, I think, where you're just doing the beholding of the horror, but there's no commentary about what to do. So you have all these liberals that have no idea what to do with themselves. They're just outraged. And it also leaves you wide open to then what this right-wing commentator hops in and says. He goes, well, our first president ever did this. Because when you sit there and focus on like, no president has ever said this, no president has ever done this, now it's easy for someone to just bring up another example, whether it's Obama or George Washington. They can just be like, well, what about when this person did this? So you're not actually talking about the policy and saying this is why it's bad that Trump's doing this and saying this, but also here's what needs to happen now because of that. I do think it shows that like Sam is trying to have a conversation about like, this is what's going to happen over the next year, probably, I think. And, let's talk about what we should do about it. And that's the kind of conversation that doesn't really happen on these shows. And so when I'm talking about, commentary that has some bite to it, not that commentary is, the source or the crux of anything, but it is a powerful tool. And what happens when it becomes more institutionalized is that practicality, the bite in terms of putting actionable ideas out into the world, gets curbed in favor of something that's a little bit more politically safe, a little bit more business savvy. And on the other side, in terms of Fox News, what you have over there is still an institution, but it's founded on just a more activist principle, So, because like there's a take on this that these are supposed to be news channels, and even the opinion stuff, it's not supposed to be activism necessarily, except for the fact that that looks quite impotent next to the very active competition, which has managed to claw its way to cultural dominance by constantly filling the airwaves with more direct messaging that in some cases directs people to, inflict their political anger and discontent in certain directions, boycotting a certain company, targeting a certain political figure with a lot of anger. And Trump has only accelerated that by being somebody that's directly connected to that, like, base of people that might go out in the streets and do something, show up somewhere, go to a PTA meeting or the Capitol on January 6th. And so it's good that, thinking the way Sam does, he's finding himself in these type of environments where he can get that out there a little bit. But there's always going to be a limit to that. And I think, honestly, the more that they find themselves on these channels doing that, like when Emma Vigeland went on MSNBC and said that Hakeem Jeffries should be primaried, there's just usually the commentators are not speaking so plainly about their opinions. And probably the more they do, the less they find themselves in those seats. But it's good to take the opportunity when you have it. So this is another clip of Sam giving his opinion on the meeting between Trump and Zohran Mamdani. It was fortuitous timing. He went on this show the day after that meeting happened, so he got to get his commentary in there quick. And then I'll just give some quick updates about the NYC DSA situation and all that.
Everybody wants to pay attention, and it is a spectacle, and they're going to give you the show, and that's exactly what they did today, because they both agree. You disagree.
No, I agree, but I have to say...
You've been to the club.
No, I have rarely been to the club. But I have to say that I thought what Mamdani was able to do today was masterful. He got the president to praise FDR. I mean, if you think about this in terms of, like, who knows what's going to happen months from now in terms of how they're going to get along. But Mamdani, in an hour, was able to essentially blow up the idea of demonizing democratic socialists. So Elise Stefanik is now lost in the middle of the ocean without any tether. Even people like, Chuck Schumer, even people within the Democratic establishment, even Hakeem Jeffries, who was afraid of Mamdani, that he was going to ruin congressional elections around the country because they were going to run against Mamdani. They can no longer do that.
So what Sam says here about how the whole plan of demonizing DSA has been kind of blown up by Trump doesn't mean it's not going to come back. And as somebody else on this panel points out, just because they have had a positive interaction doesn't mean that it's going to remain like that or that something isn't going to happen. Trump obviously flip-flops and is crazy, and there could just be something substantive that gets in the way at some point, and all of a sudden they're enemies. But the idea that Trump standing next to him and saying that we essentially agree in our goal set, it throws cold water on the idea that people can say what Zohran is doing is some kind of evil communist project. Now, if Trump wanted to go back to allowing the Republican Party to demonize him, it'd be pretty easy for him to say, well, I thought Zohran Mamdani wanted what's best for NYC, but it turns out, he's doing this and that crazy communist thing, and so now it's all down the tubes. And that's pretty much all he would have to say, and then that narrative is back. So we'll see if it holds up. But it ties into this thing about Hakeem Jeffries. So essentially, there was a person in the NYC circuit that was going to run a primary campaign against Hakeem Jeffries, and I suppose still might in 2026. And DSA was holding a vote as to whether or not to endorse this person. This was an associate of Mamdani, somebody who gave Mamdani his endorsement and has a sizable following online. His name is Chiose, and he was a recent joinee of DSA, so not somebody who's been in the organization for a long time. So that's why there was some deliberation about whether to endorse him, whether he was trustworthy enough in his intentions, as well as whether it was the right time. And that's what we were hearing from people like AOC and Zohran Mamdani, is that now is not the right time to run a primary against Hakeem Jeffries. And so that's, a little bit baffling for some people, not necessarily because there's no reason to say that, but more so just that I wasn't really hearing that reason. And I still haven't necessarily, although it seems like the calculation is that by not creating an environment where the institutional Democrats like Hakeem Jeffries feel threatened by the DSA wing of the party, it will make it easier for Zohran Mamdani to get his agenda through in New York, which will ultimately be the best thing for DSA, because if Zohran Mamdani is successful as a mayor, then that is what's going to allow the national narrative around their project to change. So that is sound, and I agree with it. The question is, why exactly does primarying Hakeem Jeffries get in the way of that? I know that it is risky, but Kathy Hochul is up against a primary challenge by her own number 2 that she picked and that was on the ticket that she was elected on. And now that person is primarying her, and that's part of what's putting her in a position where she's under pressure to also deliver on Mamdani's agenda. So that is part of the reason that she is incentivized to be aligned with Zohran Mamdani. So the question is, if it's not the right thing to create that left flank when it comes to Hakeem Jeffries so that he is incentivized to do some of the more progressive things, to help with some of the more progressive things that Zohran wants to do, what is it exactly that's going to incentivize him to do that? And also, what part does Hakeem Jeffries really even have to play in Zohran Mamdani's mayorship? I mean, I'm sure there's some part. I don't want to downplay it. He's a national politician in New York. They all work together. And I think this is mostly about just like the general alignment and efficiency when it comes to Democrats. But it seems to me that Hakeem Jeffries is like a primary target of the type of pressure that needs to be applied on the Democratic Party right now. So, by the way, just in case it wasn't clear, NYC DSA voted not to endorse Chiosei, so he's not getting the endorsement. But there's a possible read of it where you say, okay, right now, Zohran hasn't even taken office yet. So in some ways, he's not even really the leader that he's going to be yet, because he doesn't actually have the levers of power. But it's more so just that his decision making right now is quite impactful. And the things that we're seeing from him now is, definitely an indication of what he's going to be doing. So you could say that as of right now, it's not the right time for there to be tension between him and Hakeem Jeffries. However, if Hakeem Jeffries does not assist Zohran and instead tries to run some kind of right-wing flank against him, that's when he would be up against a primary threat. So that's possibly what it means to say it's not the right time. But again, that's just not exactly what we've heard. I think it's been a little bit vague. And look, this is NYC DSA. They don't really have to answer to the rest of the nation. They're trying to figure out how to get the best result out of this Zohran Mamdani mayorship. And as of right now, they decided that running a primary against Hakeem Jeffries is not the way to do that. So real quick, this last clip of Sam Seder, this is a cute little segment they do on this show where it's, this is my hot take. This is what really grinds my gears. And I thought this was another example of Sam using the opportunity in an interesting way. So here's that real quick.
I have a problem with algorithms. I think we should use antitrust laws, and I think we should get rid of algorithms. I think we should more or less make them illegal. No more feeding us stuff on YouTube. I think it's bad for society, both in terms of our citizenry and in terms of our culture. I think it's bad on Amazon. I think it's a way that we get exploited. I may have a little squishiness on Netflix algorithm, but even then, if we need to get rid of
back to the Stone Age.
Yeah, so actually not that much of an unpopular opinion here. I think you could probably run a whole presidential campaign on get rid of the algorithms, and people would connect with that, because the algorithm has become sort of a shorthand for just all of the different machine learning technology that sort of manipulates us on social media. Everybody's kind of aware of it. Everybody has a different idea of how it works, but the algorithm is something that broadly people understand as having hugely damaging implications in their lives, their kids' lives, their friends' lives. Everybody sees it. And so this thing that he says about using antitrust law to force companies to get rid of the algorithm, again, that's just the kind of thing you don't often hear on these type of programs, because the people who end up in these seats don't tend to have those type of opinions, first of all. And also, it's not necessarily in the interest of the businesses that are kind of propping up these outlets to be floating ideas about breaking up big businesses, antitrust law, things like that. It's not that it's fully censored. Obviously, Sam Seder was able to get this out there. I have a feeling that that's why he was, sequestered to this Saturday morning show, as well as they kind of rotated him out of the chair at one point. So it's like being on probation or like a trial period or something. And it's because he says things like this. This is not, a call to violence or some kind of huge argument with his right-wing interlocutor, but this is him saying this is a practical policy that people can support and voice their support for, that if it were to get passed, it could make your life better. And I think in connection, especially the fact that he mentioned antitrust, with what Lina Khan also now aims to do in Zohran Mamdani's administration, where she's immediately looking at the law and what type of authority the mayor's office has to use the law to pressure companies to bring their prices down and to stop predatory practices, which is exactly how she was using the FTC during her tenure there. And so, voices like Sam Seder are able to help people make those connections. People have a desire for things like get rid of the algorithm, stop Google and Facebook and Palantir from being evil, but they don't know what it means to actually meaningfully, substantially oppose those companies. So it's good for somebody to go on a CNN program and give voice to that. Whether or not that's going to be like a meaningful source of that type of commentary going forward, I wouldn't hold my breath.
Pressure getting pressed, do you feel it now? What even happens next, I don't really know. Voice carries less, can you hear me now? Soon as I get blessed, time's running out. Pressure getting pressed. Pressure getting pressed. Feel the pressure getting pressed. Yeah. Pressure, do you feel it now? I'm just saying this.